They got him. Penn State now lands a quarterback in the class of 2024, and it is Ethan Grunkemeyer out of the state of Ohio. But the question is being asked, did Penn State settle with all of its quarterback targets?
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, thanks so much for making Locked On Nittany Lions your first listen and watch every single day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcast, your number one daily podcast for the Penn State Nittany Lions. I am your host, Zach Seyko, and this show, of course, is now the official podcast of Penn State rivals. You can go visit happyvalleyinsider.com. Go ahead, type it in, happyvalleyinsider.com, to get the latest for Penn State athletics, all 31 varsity sports, of course, including football and men's basketball, especially with all the recruiting news that is going on. Elite 11 regional camp hosted by State College, of course, depending on when you're watching this episode. It's going on today, Sunday, May 21st. I am going to be there and bring you all the feedback, impressions from the quarterbacks that are there, whether they are committed to Penn State, being targeted by Penn State, and just giving you overall impressions of how it went. But this is big for Penn State's recruiting. But this show is going to be devoted to Ethan Grunkemeyer, as he is now officially committed. He's going to be throwing at Elite 11, but this show is about him and what he brings as a prospect, how he contributes to Penn State, why they targeted him, why they got a commitment out of him, how this gives the outlook for Penn State's quarterback room, and then why they ultimately missed out on their other targets. Of course, Michael Van Buren was someone that was in the headlines, and he committed to Oregon the same day that Ethan Grunkemeyer committed to Penn State. And if you like what we do here at Locked On Nittany Lions, make sure you follow along wherever you get your podcasts so that you're always up to date with new ones, and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Yes, subscribe to Locked On Nittany Lions on YouTube, and like this episode and comment any feedback. So let's get into it here. Ethan Grunkemeyer is the first quarterback commit, and yes, I say first, for the class of 2024. He's a 3-star according to Rivals. This is someone that has been gaining some steam, right? He's been moving up the rankings. He's getting a lot of recognition as of late. He's a pro-style quarterback. He's 6'2", 190 pounds, and he's out of the state of Ohio. This might sound familiar because he draws a lot of parallels to Drew Allar, who's already on campus, who's going to be the starter for Penn State in this upcoming season. And he's a top 25 quarterback according to recruiting sites. So that seems to be the consensus, that he is in the top half of this class of 2024 QB ranks. Now, he's got the same. Now, why I say the parallels to Drew Allar? Well, because he's from Ohio. He actually has the same personal quarterback coach, Brad Mandler, who was working with Drew Allar a lot. So you can give a lot of credit to Coach Brad with the development of Drew Allar. The same can be said for Ethan Grunkemeyer here, as another one of these disciples of Brad is committing to Penn State. But Penn State, and now this is the story of it, right? Penn State gets him onto campus. They're hosting the Elite 11. This is someone who is gaining some recognition. Clemson really wanted to get him down for a visit, and this was important. Penn State had, not necessarily, I don't want to call this a ticking time bomb, if you will, but this was something that was definitely time sensitive, okay? Clemson wanted to get him onto campus. They wanted to offer him a scholarship. So that means Penn State had to play its hand pretty quickly. And they did. They got Ethan on campus before Elite 11. They impressed him, and it seems like things worked pretty quickly. They went pretty fast, and he makes the commitment on Saturday, May 20th, before the Elite 11 competition. So it seemed like Clemson was going to be a threat. The Nittany Lions, Mike Yurcich, James Franklin, they all understood that, and they get a commitment, a verbal commitment out of Ethan Grunkemeyer in the class of 2024. But for Clemson, they don't offer recruits unless they visit campus. And Penn State just beat them to the punch, right? You had the advantage here. You had the connection from Ohio, of course, Coach Brad Mandler, Drew Allar, and now you bring in Ethan Grunkemeyer, and you just kind of say, all right, Clemson, you can stay in your corner. But this is Ethan Grunkemeyer as a prospect. Okay, so aside from all of the connections, what does Grunkemeyer actually bring to the table? Well, this is another under the radar find from Mike Yurcich. And he, again, I'm going to continue to say this phrase, he was beating other schools to the punch. Okay, Ethan Grunkemeyer was coming up the rankings. He was rising, And Penn State was one of the first ones to just kind of get out in front of his recruitment before all these other schools kind of jumped on the bandwagon here for Grunkmeyer. Yet again, Mike Yurcich goes out to the state of Ohio and finds a diamond in the rough. And that's exactly what Drew Allar was. Once upon a time, Drew Allar was not the top quarterback that you thought he was coming out of high school, right? He was someone that developed over time. He really sprung forward his junior and, of course, his senior seasons. But Mike Yurcich and James Franklin, they have a knack for finding those guys who are a little behind when it comes to their development clock. And that's what I think Grunkmeyer is here as well. And of course, relationships with these quarterback coaches are very important. Grunkmeyer, solid size, of course. We mentioned it's 6'2", 190 pounds. I imagine that he might grow a little taller. He could end up being 6'3" when all said and done, maybe even 6'4", right? This is a 16, 17-year-old kid. He's got plenty of room for the genetics to kick in. And then 190 pounds, I could see him easily putting on 30 more pounds at the quarterback position, ultimately topping out at around 6'3", 220 pounds. That is ideal size for what Penn State likes to do now with these pro-style quarterbacks. Of course, Drew is a different breed, right? 6'5", 240 pounds, of course, so that's different. But this Grunkmeyer, of course, isn't this... The parallels are there in terms of the relationships and just the development of these quarterback skills. But in terms of the type of quarterback that Grunkmeyer is, it's a lot more mobile than Drew Allar, right? Drew Allar is a pocket quarterback. He's going to use that presence. He's great mobility within the pocket. But as far as straight line speed goes, of course, there are other quarterbacks that are going to be faster than Mr. Allar. In the case of Grunkmeyer, he's got some speed to him. He's got some wheels. He's not afraid to move outside of the pocket. He has mobility in this. So he's not a dual threat quarterback, but he's teetering on that classification, if I can say. As far as what he does from what type of quarterback he is, he has a slight tendency to throw into double coverage. You watch the highlights, you watch some of his film, you can see that. But why are plays where he's throwing into double coverage ending up on his tape? Well, because he's completing those passes. So that, with that being said, he has a lot of good accuracy. He's a very accurate quarterback. So this is someone that you can trust to throw. Like, you're thinking, why is he throwing into double coverage? How are you, like, you cringe at some of these decisions, but he completes the passes at the same time. So that is a good sign for him. In addition to that, the accuracy, I mean, he is smart. He has good field recognition. This is some, of course, some decision making is questionable here and there, but a very smart quarterback, and that's what Penn State likes. They don't just go after these overall athletes who really, they just kind of go kicking and screaming right down the field. No, this is someone who's cerebral. He understands the game. He's smart. He recognizes the field, has the awareness. So that's very important as well. And I think this is someone who has the chance, as far as when it comes from a throw power, the way he gets his velocity on the football, it's pretty middle of the road. I think there's room for improvement, right? You can always build up some arm strength, but it's right now middle of the pack at this point in time. He has the chance to bump up to being a 4-star prospect. So this goes back to him being a diamond in the rough. Mike Yurcich, James Franklin, figuring this out, finding these kind of prospects, and then offering them. He was trending very highly. Again, he was wanted by the Clemson Tigers. So Penn State doing its due diligence and getting a solid quarterback for the class of 2024. I like him. Diamond in the rough. I'll say it again. Parallels with Drew, same quarterback coach, the relationships there. He's been on campus. He fits into the system. That is the most important part out of all of this. He fits in with what Penn State is trying to do with its current quarterback system. And I'm excited to watch him in real time at the Elite 11 camp. Obviously, we're going to pay more attention to him now that he is committed to Penn State, and not just a target, but he is actually a verbal commit. So this will be a lot of fun in State College. Just again, perfect 5-minute walk, hop, skip, and a jump for Penn State, seeing these quarterbacks. And Penn State might not be done recruiting these quarterbacks. And with losing out on guys like Luke Kromenhoek and Michael Van Buren, people are asking, did they settle? Did they settle with Ethan Grunkemeyer and just kind of jump to the first quarterback who had said, you know what, I want to commit to the Nittany Lions? That's going to be answered here in just a moment. But first, let's hear from our sponsor of today's show, and that is Built Bar. Are you looking for a delicious snack, but you don't want all the sugar and calories? I totally understand, because you need to try the best tasting protein bar ever, and that is Built. If you're like me, where you want to make healthier snack choices, but you don't want to compromise all the taste, the thing for you is Built Bars and Built Puffs. Built Bars are healthy and they taste amazing. Seriously, they taste so amazing, you will not think they're good for you. You've got to try them. What makes Built Bars so good? Well, for starters, they're covered in 100% real dark chocolate. That is right, real chocolate. And they come in unbelievably tasty flavors like churro, peanut butter brownie, and cookies and cream. I'm not sure how Built does it, but these bars taste like a candy bar while maintaining amazing macros. And what's even better is that they are healthy. Only 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, and a whopping 17 grams of protein. And now you don't need to wait around to get a box anymore. For years, we've been saying, order your Built bars at Built.com, which you still can do. You can get your specialty flavors at Built.com, but now you can go to your local Walmart or Sam's Club. That is right. Head to your local Walmart, go to the pharmacy section, and grab yourself a box of Built bars. You can pick up a 4-bar box of cookies and cream, double chocolate bar, or coconut puff. And if you're close to a Sam's Club, run in and grab yourself a 13-bar box with our hit flavors like brownie batter puff and churro puff. You can thank me later. And thanks again for making Locked On Nittany Lions your first listen and watch every single day. Again, if you like what we do here, subscribe to the YouTube channel, follow along wherever you get your podcasts so you don't miss anything. Of course, we're going to have plenty of highlights from the Elite 11 camp. We're going to get a chance to see these quarterback targets, quarterback commit at the Elite 11 regional. And it'll all be right here on Locked On Nittany Lions. So keep up with us there. And of course, happyvalleyinsider.com, where you can find all the Penn State rivals coverage, which is going to be a big part of the Elite 11 regional as well here on Sunday, May 21st. Check that out too. Locked On Nittany Lions, the official podcast, the go-to podcast for Penn State rivals. So did Penn State settle? That is the question here now, because you look at the message boards, you and logically, right, this is a valid question. Ethan Grunkemeyer was not on anybody. Some boards, right, there's so many respectable ones. Of course, I love rivals, but there's On 3. There is 24/7, okay, ESPN. And everybody has a different ranking for, and Michael Van Buren's all over the place, right? He's tops according to rivals. Some places have him a little bit lower, top 20. And so there's a little bit of inconsistency. Ethan Grunkemeyer finally pushing into these rankings. He's top 25, for example, on 24/7. Rivals just added a 3-star rating to him for its national rankings. And so Penn State, Michael Van Buren, Luke Kromenhoek, those two guys were the premier targets for Penn State in this cycle. There's no shame in admitting that. There's no shame in analyzing that. And Penn State missed Kromenhoek, of course, going to Florida State. And you could add Cutter Boley in that same breath as well, who just committed to Kentucky. And it sounds like he is going to reclassify to the class of 2024. He was a 25 commit, and he's from Kentucky. It made sense, right? That was tough but Kromenhoek going to Florida State, Michael Van Buren committing to Oregon. And in the final segment, we're going to talk about why MVB is ultimately going to the Ducks and why Penn State was the favorite all along. And then Oregon just swoops right in, takes the recruitment, right? But they got the prospect they wanted here. Ethan Grunkemeyer wasn't the first choice, but this is different, right? So bear with me here as I explain this. They still got the prospect that they wanted. They wanted Michael Van Buren. They wanted Luke Kromenhoek. They wanted Ethan Grunkemeyer as well. And I get it, you can't have all of them, right? But they did not settle here. This is somebody that, and recruiting is fluid, right? Recruiting is a fluid situation where prospects are going to go up in that same breath. They're going to go down as well. They're going to trend in different directions. Just because somebody's ranked top 10 all of a sudden one moment, they can easily fall out of the top 25 another moment at their respective position or in the state rankings, okay? People have good seasons. They trend, right? Ethan Grunkemeyer is trending in the right direction. Penn State getting in front of that. So would you rather have Penn State get him to commit now when he's borderline top 25 among the consensus, and then he vaults into the top 15? That's not out of the question. The way that these Brad Mandler quarterbacks develop, that's not out of the question. So Ethan Grunkemeyer commits to Penn State while he's essentially being disrespected by the public, by the masses. Okay. And this was a good find for Penn State. They do this. Michael Van Buren was recruited for a long time and then started to get national recognition, and then Oregon gets involved, and then there's that here. But I don't think that they settled. I know that they didn't settle. They're going to offer quarterbacks that they want. Okay. They're not going to offer somebody that they don't want. It's pretty straightforward. And Penn State offered the quarterback they wanted, and they got a commitment out of it. And it was pretty fast, right? Mid-April, mid to late April, they finally offer Ethan Grunkemeyer. And then he comes to visit, and immediately he commits. Now, here's also the part of it going back to the fluidity of recruiting. Ethan Grunkemeyer is on a different developmental clock than some other quarterbacks. Okay, there's Dylan Raiola, right? There's Cutter Boley. These guys, they're very highly recruited. They go to a lot of these camps, okay? Some of these kids, they take time. They are on their own clock. They develop differently. So someone like Ethan Grunkemeyer, who we're calling a diamond in the rough, ultimately might end up on top. Who's to say he's going to finish? Who's to say he couldn't finish inside the top 10? Or close anyway, and be that quarterback prospect that everybody is overlooking. Okay, that's the case right now. So with that being said, these players need to showcase their stuff, and that's what Ethan's doing. And it's not on the same timeline as everybody else, and that's okay. Penn State saw that timeline, they got to it, and they got a commitment out of Ethan Grunkemeyer. So they did not settle. They did not settle on Ethan. They got the quarterback that they wanted after seeing what he can do and after Ethan showcased what he could do. What's the outlook at quarterback right now? Well, you have 4 quarterbacks, hypothetically. You're going to have 3 this season, right? Drew Allar, Beau Pribula, Jaxon Smolik. A transfer is not out of the realm just because I'm a big fan of that. I want a veteran. Ohio State did it. Michigan did it. I'm going to continue to bring this up about Penn State, that they need to go get a veteran quarterback just because anything could happen. But now you're creating some serious depth at quarterback with the guys that you have hypothetically for 2024 and beyond. Allar in his true junior season, Beau Pribula as a redshirt sophomore, Jaxon Smolik hypothetically as a redshirt freshman. I want him to be a redshirt. He does not see more than 4 games. He doesn't see any games, period, because of the 2 you have ahead of him. And then Ethan Grunkemeyer, and then potentially a 5th quarterback, because as Penn State, I don't think they're finished recruiting quarterbacks. They have been very transparent with the guys that they have recruited. Michael Van Buren, Hoke, that they want to take 2 quarterbacks in the class of 2024. I know there was some thought that they weren't going to get one, period, in the class of 24, and no, they are more likely to get 2 as opposed to 0 here. And of course, you need all 4 to stick around, right? Beau Pribula and Jaxon Smolik, they could make any decision that they want. I don't think they will. I'm not here to say that they will or they won't, but let's assume, for the safety of it, just for the safety of this discussion, that all 4 are in the room next season. And again, they might not be done in the class of 2024 for recruiting to get that second quarterback prospect. There's still a lot of guys that they like, and I'm going to name a few of them here in the second segment. But in the age of the transfer portal, this is the big picture. You now are creating a natural transition from one quarterback to another, because the transfer portal allows people to come and go, especially with that first transfer. The second you transfer in that first go around, there are no restrictions. You can go and make a different decision and go to another team. And that's fine. You know, the transfer portal, it is what it is. It's here to stay. I'm not here to critique it. But now you can go from Drew Allar to hypothetically Beau Pribula. And then the jury is out on Jaxon Smolik, but now you have Ethan Grunkemeyer. Hypothetical, let's just say quarterback X, QB X, right? Those 3 guys can now compete to be that future starter after Beau Pribula. Now there's no more guessing, wondering, is Jaxon Smolik going to be able to carry the water? Is he going to live up to the expectations? Are any of these guys going to push Beau, right? We can't assume. I like Beau Pribula a lot. I hope that it goes from Drew to Beau and then whichever quarterback in the future. But Jaxon Smolik's not sitting there and saying, well, I'll wait my turn, and, I'll wait until after Drew leaves and goes to the NFL, then Beau Pribula gets his turn, and then I'll get mine. And no. Jackson's there to ultimately try and take over after Drew leaves. Like, that's the idea. They don't just come in to say, well, I'll wait, climb up the ladder as soon as it's ready. But now Penn State is in a good position where they have some insurance, they have some safety. and they don't feel as pressured. And especially with class of 2025, you don't have to feel as pressured to go out and get that blue chip quarterback prospect, because now you're building depth. And that's something that's Penn State has harped on. Even though they have a lot of talent in the quarterback room presently, they're creating depth. So with that being said, the class of 2024, are they going to get a second quarterback in this class? Potentially, but the odds are a little less likely. Experts were high on Tyler Cherry. This was someone that was rising in the rankings as well. Big 6'5" quarterback, someone that a lot of experts really liked as a prospect, committed to Duke same day. So a lot of quarterback chips fell into place. Michael Van Buren, right? You have, of course, Ethan Grunkemeyer, and then Tyler Cherry chooses Duke. He committed just yesterday, Saturday, May 20th. Samaj Jones is someone that I am very high on. Dual threat quarterback, more of your traditional dual threat comparisons, right, to Jalen Hurts. He's being recruited by Oklahoma, West Virginia, St. Joe's Prep out in Philly. Recruiting analysts have him projected to Penn State. Dylan Callaghan-Crowley, who of course writes for Rivals, for Penn State Rivals, he says that West Virginia is probably the leader here, that he could end up as a Mountaineer, but Penn State seems to be the consensus by a majority of prediction experts that he will go to Penn State. So maybe that's their second quarterback. And he's actually going to be at Elite 11 in-state college, of course, Sunday, May 21st. There's Jaden Bradford. He could still be in play. Now, this was someone when we talked to Dylan, if you've seen the previous episodes, and we've kind of been in front of some of this stuff, right? We released the episode saying that Penn State is close to landing its quarterback commitment, and boom, they got him. But here's also the insight as well. Jaden Bradford was someone that Penn State recruited heavily early on, and then they have backed off since. And that's kind of the same thing with a lot of schools. Not as many places are recruiting him as heavily early in the process. And like I said, prospects go up, prospects also go down. They don't just stay at that spot that they're first given. So he could end up at Penn State, but I would be he's probably a little lower on the big board right now. There's Miles O'Neill, who just recently got an offer from Penn State. Very excited about him as a prospect. He's going to be at Elite 11 as well. Get the chance to see him. There's Trevor Jackson out of Florida. Penn State likes him. And then there's one final one that I think Penn State fans should keep an eye on, and that is Ryan Puglisi. He's a top 15 quarterback in the entire country, pretty much almost a top 10. Committed to Georgia. Okay. There's a little bit of a catch now, because Georgia landed the number one quarterback in the entire country in Dylan Raiola. Thought he was going to go to Nebraska, right? Because that family member on the coach. Just Georgia at top of its game right now. And Raiola, better at Georgia than Ohio State, because he was committed there with Ryan Day, and I'm glad he is out of the picture with the Buckeyes. So he can be down at Georgia. But Puglisi, man, you land the number one quarterback and an almost top 10 quarterback. Puglisi is probably in a position where, he's not afraid of a little competition, but come on, like, he's the caliber where he could go in and start for a lot of programs as a true freshman. I'm not saying every Power 5, but could probably step into a Group 5 situation, be the day one starter, could go into a Power 5 and be at least compete for the job, and definitely be the starter for the year after. So that's the situation that he's in. So Penn State, word is that they have been pushing for him to see if they can get him to flip. Of course, that's the case with a lot of other schools, but Puglisi is a target that Penn State is in communication with, and they want to try to get him in the class of 2024 as well. Again, I would think that Samaj Jones becomes an obvious one here as the top out of the ones that I named, in addition to Miles O'Neill and Trevor Jackson. I would say those are the three to be on the lookout for, because Tyler Cherry's out of the fold now. And then those other names that I mentioned, a little lower, but there's hope, right? So as we move to this final segment, again, Locked On Nittany Lions, your go-to podcast for Penn State rivals. Visit happyvalleyinsider.com. And Penn State in a good spot with where it is in the quarterback room, but it goes back to Michael Van Buren, Luke Kromenhoek. Why did they miss out on some of these guys? I don't have as much insight or more as so much opinion on Luke Kromenhoek. I think that Mike Norvell in Florida State just ultimately won that recruiting battle. Maybe there was some NIL involved. Probably. Florida State seems to be dishing out money. But the case with Michael Van Buren and Oregon, Michael Van Buren, talented prospect. There's two reasons here that I want to bring up. The first one is what Oregon does with NIL. Oregon they really don't care where you are. They are going to Pennsylvania, to Maryland, anywhere in the country, and they are just offering boatloads of money. That's really what it boils down to, is simply put, Oregon's NIL budgeting is second to none. They are not afraid to invest in these prospects. They are not afraid to give. I don't know how much money. I just know that it's a lot. And that's what people are saying, is that, and Michael Van Buren even said that in interviews. He said that the opportunities both on and off the field at Oregon are the best. And of course, I'm paraphrasing, but that's very telling, right? On and off the field, meaning that the NIL opportunities, the budgeting, the whatever, the collectives. I don't know how Oregon has it set up, but that was probably a big part of this. I mean, Penn State was the leader for the longest time, but I think ultimately they just didn't have the same NIL that Oregon did. There's also another part of this too. Michael Van Buren's been recruited by James Franklin for a long time, even predating Mike Yurcich. Okay. So Mike Yurcich wasn't exactly the quarterback coach, the offensive coordinator that Michael Van Buren was getting to know all along. Of course, Kirk Shiraka was in and out, but that was the first quarterback offensive coordinator to contact Van Buren alongside of James Franklin. And I know Oregon's gone through its coaching changes, but they've been consistent the whole time. The relationships, that there's been no change in relationships. They've had Dan Lanning and, of course, those guys now for a couple years. And that's what he said. He said the relationships are great out there in Oregon. Oregon also took another quarterback, which I thought was interesting, Luke Moga out of Arizona. So Michael Van Buren was never afraid of, I thought that would be a reason if Penn State was transparent and open about getting 2 quarterback commits, that, okay, maybe Michael Van Buren might not like the situation. Oregon, exact same boat. Luke Moga, a 3-star quarterback among the consensus, and that's for everybody. Rivals 24/7 on 3. And Michael Van Buren going into a situation probably where he believes that he does have a good chance to win that competition. Who knows what he thought about Penn State, but ultimately I think the Ducks have a bigger financial investment in here because this is far away from home. Of course, I respect his decision. It's best for him. There's also the rumor, right, that Oregon and Washington could be in the Big Ten sooner rather than later. So what ultimately so that means that he's going to be traveling back across the country for some away games where it is easy for his family to see that. All these things factor in, right? It's not so cut and dry that it's just like, whoop, there's this, and now he ends up at Oregon. I think that Penn State just ultimately couldn't compete with Oregon in a variety of ways, and one of which was NIL. That's just the unfortunate circumstances, but at the end of the day, it is what it is. So I am excited to be at the Elite 11 camp in State College, Pennsylvania, get to see all these prospects that are going to be present. Of course, Ethan Grunkemeyer, get some highlights of him, get some full impressions. He now gets to showcase his skills, especially after the Penn State verbal commitment, and eyes will be on him. Of course, this is a big competition. This is a chance for quarterbacks to prove that they are some of the best. Like that, this is going to lead to the Elite 11 finals. This is a place to move on and get ready and prove that you are one of the best in the country. So it doesn't matter where you're committed. Doesn't matter if you have an open commitment, right? You're verbally committed somewhere, but you're looking for better offers. This is about competing to be the best quarterback prospect in high school in the United States. So it'll be fun to watch. All the highlights and discussion will be on here. Of course, also coming up with all of the dominoes falling in recruiting. We are going to get some of the national recruiting analysts from Rivals back on the show. Adam Friedman, Clint Cosgrove coming back. Of course, we're going to talk to Dylan Callaghan-Crowley and get Penn State's perspective in all of this. It'll be very exciting. And of course, an update on Penn State men's basketball is coming soon. They are getting commitments. They're still looking in the transfer portal. And that team is being solidified by Mike Rhodes as we speak. But until next time here on Locked On Nittany Lions, it's going to be a fun conversation, and I'll talk to you later right here.